What is up, guys? Today we're comparing the V30 to the G7, and I wanted to do this one first because these two phones are priced way too close to each other on Amazon and kind of on eBay too, surprisingly. So they don't have the same exact specs, but they're pretty close. But let's go ahead and get into it. So hardware is kind of similar. The G7, in my opinion, has just the more updated look, and that's mostly due to the sort of like candy bar form factor with the wider or the thinner aspect ratio here. As you can see, the V30 kind of has like the wider body and wider aspect ratio, so it just looks slightly a little more dated compared to the G7. That's one of the first things I noticed with the hardware. Both premium hardware on both these phones, glass and metal, so you do have IP68 on both these phones, so they can take getting wet no problem. So one of the first differences with these phones would be the display. So you have a POLED display on the V30. It's a 1440p 537, but on the G7 you have an IPS LCD 1440p 564. So the PPI is slightly higher on the G7, and you can kind of tell if you look really close up at icons and stuff like that. I definitely could tell a little bit, but you won't notice a huge difference between display quality. They're both pretty good. It's just that the V30 is going to be giving off just darker blacks, and you will be able to take advantage of always on display without the battery drain. Now you do have that on the V or the G7. It's just going to drain the battery, so I just usually keep it off. So you have Android 9 on both of these guys, and it's pretty speedy for the most part. Now this is a very essential difference here. The G7 is going to get Android 10 at sometime at the end of the year. The V30 is not on LG's list to get Android 10, so that is a big difference. So security updates and all that stuff will still be on the G7. You will not be getting that on the V30, so that is one reason to get the G7 over the V30. It does have the Snapdragon 835 on the V30, and you do have the Snapdragon 845. Now, there's not going to be a huge difference in performance. The G7 is definitely faster when launching applications and games and stuff like that. But as far as just playing actual games, you're not going to notice a huge difference. It's not like the V30 is going to be lagging all over the place. So you will be able to play games mostly on high as well with the Snapdragon 835. So it's a good processor still, but like I said, it is just a snappier experience on the G7. Now you do have micro SD card support on both of these guys, as well as 64 gigs of internal storage on both, and 4 gigs of RAM. So swiping, going through applications, multitasking is going to be pretty much the same as far as RAM management. And now you do have 16 megapixel standard and a 13 megapixel ultra wide on the V30, as well as 4K video, 5 megapixel front that shoots in 1080p. You have the same dual camera setup on the G7, 16 megapixel standard, 16 megapixel ultra wide, 4K, and you also have an 8 megapixel camera on the front that shoots in 1080p. So photo quality on here on both these phones are actually pretty decent. I still prefer the G7, especially for like indoor shots and stuff like that. I just think you're just getting a cleaner photo, but the V30 is pretty decent. It just gets colors kind of a little off sometimes. They both actually do, but like I said, I really prefer the G7's camera here, but they're both not bad, and they're both pretty close. But like I said, you know which one I prefer. So as far as the rest of the features with the phone, you have the headphone jack with the quad DAC, of course. NFC is on both here, USB type C. You also have a really good speaker on the V30, but it's not as good as the G7's. It's just not as loud, but it keeps that clarity. The G7 just has an overall better speaker. I still haven't found a single firing speaker that's better than G7, but I will give credit to the V30. It is pretty loud and a nice speaker, just it's not as good as the G7, so don't expect it to be. As far as the battery situation on here, which is pretty interesting, I might do a drain test on the V30 here, because I was impressed with the battery life and the standby time here. You got a 3,300 milliamp battery with 18 watt fast charging. You also have wireless charging at 10 watts. Now on the G7 you have a 3000 milliamp battery, so a smaller battery, even though they have the same display size. So you have a 6-inch display on the V30 and a 6.1 inch on the G7. I don't know why they put such a small battery in the G7, but I feel like I'm definitely getting better battery life on the V30. Like I said, I will have to do a drain test to make sure, but you still have fast charging 18 watts on the G7 and wireless charging. It's just I feel like I'm just getting better battery life on the V30, so I really like that. But as far as getting through a day with both these phones, you will be able to no problem. So overall, if you're gonna ask me which one would I personally go with, I would go with the G7 all the way, just because I'm getting Android 10. The speakers better. I think the cameras are just slightly a little better, and it is definitely a little bit faster. And I just think the design just looks a little bit more updated. Now, a lot of people don't like the notch, but there is a option where you can hide the notch on the G7, so it's not a huge deal. So what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.